Welcome back to Betting People with Michael Holding. Now, in this part, we're going to talk a bit more about Michael's experiences in Newmarket, where he's lived for many years. And of course, you are, Michael, a close friend of the great Sir Michael Stoute. Tell us how you ended up meeting him.
Well, that stems from the fact that I had horses in Jamaica, and the trainer that trained my horses in Jamaica, one of his daughters got married to a Bajan, as we call people from Barbados Bajan, for those who might not be aware of the term. And she got married to this guy, and he knew Michael Stoute. Now, in 1985, he came up to spend some time in Newmarket. I was at Derbyshire playing county cricket. That was my first full year of playing county cricket at Derbyshire. And he called me and said to me, would you like to come and meet Michael Stoute? Because he obviously knew of my association with races in Jamaica with his wife's father and that sort of a thing. And I said, absolutely, tell me where and when. And of course, they gave me directions to come down this Newmarket and exactly where to go. And so I drove down when I had a couple of days free from Derbyshire, went down to the stables and met Michael Stoute at evening stables one afternoon. Don't remember exactly which afternoon it was. I just remember it was 1985. And from that day, the friendship with him just grew and grew. And of course, with me being able to work for Sky and for the last 22 years going to England every summer, that just gave me more and more opportunities to go to Newmarket, to go to the stables, and to build that friendship with him.
Wonderful. And just for those who haven't been there, because we have plenty of trainers on Betting People, what's it like at Freemasons Lodge? What sets him and the facilities apart from, plenty of other people who have horses, because he's been so successful over the years?
It's difficult for me to say what he has or what he does that sets him apart from others, because I'm not really someone who would visit a lot of stables to say, okay, Michael Stoute stables has this, these stables don't have that. I'm not au fait with other trainers as to exactly how they operate. I know a lot of trainers in Newmarket, but I'm not in their yard every day with their horses every day to know exactly how they operate for me to then say, okay, Michael Stoute does this differently from them. But what I know about Michael Stoute and all the years that I have spent with him, and I'm not saying this to say other trainers are not the same, because I say I don't know. But from my association with him, what I can say is that he's a very patient person. He also tries to know each horse as an individual. He knows they're all different animals. They all have different characteristics. They all have different personalities, although people will tell you, oh, a horse has a personality. No way. But I know they do. And he understands that, and he tries to differentiate them in that way and treat them differently, instead of just having a treadmill where you're just turning out horses day in, day out. So that I know about him. I also know that he has a photographic memory. In my early days at Michael Stoute, I never saw him with a piece of paper. He would go into the yard and he would remember exactly what each horse had did. And that's the days when he had a lot more horses than he has now. Now he perhaps, I don't know exactly how many, but he perhaps have 130 horses. Those days he perhaps had 190, 200 horses. And he would know each individual one. He would know what they had done over a period of time. And he knew exactly what to tell each jockey as they passed him what to do. Because he had his plans exactly when they would be running, exactly how far from today he wanted them to do what. Obviously now he has gotten a little bit older. He needs to have his paper to remember his notes and that sort of thing. But I never saw Michael Stoute with a piece of paper in the early days. And he had this characteristic of writing things in his palm, pretend to write, because obviously he's not writing anything. And when he wrote it in his palm, because of the photographic memory, he would even rub it out. But that was just one of his things that he did. And once he did that, he never forgot it. And, people say he's a genius. There are lots of geniuses, but I know that he is fantastic when it comes to his horses.
Very well said. I think plenty of fans of Michael Stoute would agree with that. You live in Newmarket now, and you have done for some time. Did your relationship with Sir Michael play a big part in you moving there and basing yourself there?
When you say I live in Newmarket, I think the word that you just used, basing myself there, is more appropriate. I base myself there for the summer because when I'm working with Sky, that's where I am. And
Yeah.
absolutely, that's the
My
reason why,
apologies.
no problem. And absolutely, that's the reason why I am in Newmarket. For the very first year, when I went to work for Sky, 1995, I hadn't gotten a full-term contract yet. But they were putting me up for that summer because West Indies were touring, and I was working with Sky. And I was asked by my boss at the time, John Gaylord, where I wanted to live. And I said Newmarket because they were going to pay the rent for wherever I was. And they were quite happy because obviously the rent in London is a lot more than the rent in Newmarket. They were happy that I was happy to go to Newmarket. And since 1995, I've been going back to England and staying in Newmarket. I was renting a place right opposite to Michael Stoute's yard for a few years. Then eventually, when my family wanted to come and join me during the summer months in Newmarket, I had to then buy somewhere because I was just renting a one-bedroom flat at the time. So I had to then buy a house in Newmarket. And that's where I have been now for donkey's years. And obviously, that gives me the opportunity to go to the stables every morning. Once I'm not working with Sky, I'm at the stables every morning because it's 5 minutes away from where I'm actually living. So it's easy access. And that has made things very, very nice for me.
Wonderful indeed. Quite a few people who will be watching this may have had an interest in horses, in owning horses in the past, and who may actually own horses now. Obviously, it's a tricky time for the racing industry, but I wanted to talk basically a bit more about racehorse ownership and that experience because this is a tough time for the industry, and plenty of people who watch Betting People who would have been guests will either have had an interest in owning racehorses in the past or might currently do. What would you say to people who might be thinking about getting into racehorse ownership? Because it's a time when the industry needs it and it can bring great benefits. And I wanted to know what some of those were for you.
Well, what I'd say to those people is that, this is not ideal right now. As things stand right now, to be owning horses and being unable to really enjoy the total experience of going to the races and going in the ring and celebrating if your horse is winning and that sort of thing. But what I'd say to them is they know the enjoyment that would have brought them in the past. And you have to just be a little bit patient. One would hope that things will improve and improve dramatically next year, and people will be able to almost go back, not to normal, but to as close as normal as you possibly can and get back to enjoying that sport. Because I don't think I need to tell people who have owned horses that when that horse wins, it gives you such a high. As I've said on some interviews in the past, when my horse won a race, I felt better than when I took 5 weeks in a test match. Those 5 weeks in a test match were fantastic, and they would have helped my team to win the match or to put up a good performance. But then you have to move on because your job lies ahead. You have more work to do. When your horse wins, it's celebration time. You can't think, oh, I have other things to do. You can fully consume yourself into that moment when the horse wins and when you can celebrate that feeling that you got. And as we all know, so many horses run on tracks, and so many have never win a race. So many owners struggle to win as many races as they would like. So when you have that winner, it's a moment that you need to be able to celebrate and really celebrate to the fullest. So I can understand right now that people can be a little bit disappointed with the way things are going, but it's a matter of patience. Just as if you have a nice 2-year-old and the trainer says to you, listen, we're going to be patient with this 2-year-old. He could be a nice horse as a 3-year-old. The same thing happening now. You just have to be patient and hope that things get better.
You're known as, or at least if the Sky cricket team are to be believed, you're known as somebody who's a little bit of a form student in their spare time. I'd like you to tell the viewers what you think or what you really take into account when you're trying to make selections.
Well, you have to take everything into account. There are no shortcuts. You have to know the history of the horse. That's why I'm not too big on betting on 2 year olds because there's no form to study. I can't know what I need to back in unless I get information. And I don't like just relying on information. So you have
Mm,
to take everything into consideration, the previous performances of the horse, under what conditions those horses or that horse performed, like distance and the type of ground and the trainer, the jockey, the type of form that the trainer is in. All those things have to be taken into consideration. So that's why it is such a long effort, such a hard job to really go into all the details to try and find which horse you should be backing. But at the same time, you can do all that hard work and that horse perhaps that day just didn't feel right. I don't perform to the expectations. If it was as simple as that, you wouldn't really have bookmakers. Everybody would be a winner because following the form is hard work, but it's not impossible. But at the same time, because horses are animals and animals have good days and bad days, it makes it more difficult.
very precise answer there. I'm sure plenty of people will appreciate that. You've been racing plenty of times in Britain, I presume. A lot of people have been talking recently, albeit in extraordinary circumstances, about you know the race day experience for owners. Owners are some of the people who are lucky enough to get on the course at the moment. If and when things return to normal, is there anything that you'd like to see improved about the race day experience?
Well, what is happening now, owners can go to the races, yes, but they still can't get the full experience of ownership. They can't go into the ring, for instance, and
Mm.
have to work with the jockey or the trainer or actually being close up with their horses. So it's a slightly different experience to what they're accustomed to doing. You know, owning horses, I think a lot of people understand what it means. A lot of horses don't pay for themselves. So a lot of owners would go into the sport not as a business, some do, yes, but not necessarily as a business, but as something recreational, and I know it has a cost of that recreational aspect of their life. And that is what owning horses is all about. You know, next year you'll have more fun. And that is why I think a lot of people are so unhappy this year and what has been happening this year because it's costing. Horses don't return on the investment, and at the same time they're not getting the fun that they are hoping that they would have had. So that just makes things a little bit more difficult. But hopefully next year everyone will be able to go back. They'll be able to go into the ring because that's a great experience. Walking into that ring and you know that you have an affiliation with a particular horse. Going into the ring, being able to even just have a quiet word with the jockey, not necessarily anything to do with the race, but just say hello and to be able to talk to the jockey, to talk to the trainer, and then walk back up to watch your horse perform in that race. All of that is a part of the experience. And I know owners are right now are a little bit worried about that aspect of things. Spending all this money and not getting the fun and the real enjoyment that they are looking for.
I think that is very well said, and hopefully things do change with that. Just quickly to end this part, plenty of people in cricket do have an interest in the sport of racing. Of course, you are well amongst them. Um, how popular is racing within cricket, and is it still something that's growing actually amongst current and ex-pro players?
I think it's fairly popular. Even before I started to play for the West Indies, we had quite a few West Indian cricketers who I know were very interested in horse racing. And in my team, there were a few, not many. I would say no more than 10% actually. It's not a lot in the team that I played in the 80s. When I played county cricket in England, there were again a few in the county team, but not at the level that you would like because you would like to see, well, I would at any rate because I love horse racing. I love to see the participation growing, and I'd love to see more people of my background and my race and my sort of skills getting involved with racing. I would love to see a lot more diversity. And I don't see a lot of that when I go to the racetrack. I know what before racing was on television on a regular basis because I've been going to England since 1976. I would go into betting shops. I would see a lot of West Indians, a lot of BAME, as they say now, in the betting shops, but not on the racetrack. And I think a lot of them do not think that the racetrack is the right atmosphere for them, because when they look on the screens and when they look at people at the racetrack, they don't see many that look like them. So that is the aspect of it that I would like to see improve. A lot more diversity in all spheres of horse racing, not just in the betting shops, in all angles and different ways of horse racing.
A very strong note upon which to end part 2 of Betting People. Thank you very much, Michael Holding.
My pleasure.